Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hope That Helps podcast. I'm Camille.
And I'm Ramsey. And today we're going to talk about foster care and having a job. We're going to talk about foster care and work. So it should be pretty interesting to you guys, I think. A lot of questions surrounding work is how do you maintain a full-time job? Do you maintain a full-time job? Mm-hmm. Are you allowed to work in foster care? What does it look like to foster and juggle a busy work schedule? For me, I'm a single parent. So how does one work full-time and parent full-time and all of those things? And so I think we're going to jump into that a little bit today, maybe how to approach your work when you're thinking about fostering. So we'll start from the beginning with that and just talk about what do you do, Camille, whenever you're thinking about fostering? How do you approach that conversation, maybe with your boss or your coworkers? Kind of just let them know, hey, my entire life is about to change. About to welcome a kid into my home. How do you feel about that?
Right. I'm curious to know your side of that because for us, we work in nonprofit, so we're surrounded by this type of thing all the time. So for us, it wasn't like this whole thing that we had to prepare our coworkers and our, superiors for. It was pretty natural going into this. Obviously, things that come up take you away from your job. And so those are conversations that we did have to have, Zach and I had to have. But overall, it wasn't something that our job was not willing to work with us on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Same for me. I do work for like a larger hospital system. So, when I was initially thinking about it, and I'm a single person, I think there were some like valid concerns where people were like, hey, how are you going to do that though? And I honestly didn't really have a lot of answers. I was like, I'm going to do my job and I'm also going to parent.
Right.
How? Don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. But, my supervisor was very understood the mission of what I was doing. I shared my heart with them. I'm very thankful to have employers that care enough, care about kids and, care about what I care about. And I think that was big for me if they were willing to be flexible with me. I think good questions to ask are, hey, if we had a situation arise, how flexible are you willing to be with me about this and that? When I get a placement at first, how flexible are you willing to be with me? How much time can I miss work? Like a lot of actually big state-run organizations or larger companies have policies when it comes to fostering and adopting of how much time you can take off and stuff like that. And so I would also say, like, look at your policy or ask, if you're having these conversations, ask your supervisor, do you have a policy? Is there something like written in about time that I could take off or just how flexible you're willing to be kind of on that front? I think it's a really important conversation to have.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I can imagine some employers would not be maybe as flexible or not even be able to be depending on what type of job you have.
Right. And I think, too, it depends on the age of child you're bringing in because, if you have an age range you're looking at, it's going to look very different. Yeah. If it's school age, then you're potentially going to jump right back into school and you're not necessarily going to need to take time off. It's going to be in the coming months that things come up, court dates, things like that you want to be able to take off work. And so for us, that was our experience. We didn't necessarily have to take off the first, week or two because we didn't have a young child. But I could imagine for someone who's bringing in a newborn, that's a huge adjustment, or a non-school age child. That's a big adjustment. I mean, it's a big adjustment all around, but just different needs. So I think that's a very important conversation to have.
Yeah, in terms of your time and everything until you get things organized. Yeah, so we're having this conversation in America because here you have to work and foster. You have to be bringing in some type of steady income, whether you own your own business or work from home or work, 9 to 5 in a regular workplace setting. You have to have a job here. That's actually not the same in all countries.
Interesting.
So if you're a listener and you're listening not from America, there are some countries I know, like in the UK, where they actually are not allowed to have a full-time job.
Really?
They can have like a part-time job or work like a certain number of hours, but they compensate them for being foster parents enough for them to like focus on taking care of those kids.
Wow, that I did not know that.
That's crazy, isn't it?
That's pretty crazy. I'm not honestly too surprised though, because I feel like Europe versus America is like very different on things like that. I mean, you get a year of maternity leave.
Yeah.
And a lot of paternity leave. So.
For sure. And corporate America work culture, is just so different. So we're talking in that aspect today, because that's what we experience. And maybe we're not like really corporate. We both work in nonprofit technically, but like, I imagine in corporate America, these conversations look a lot different because you're expected to work a lot, sometimes work over hours, sometimes work late nights. Our culture surrounding work is already very sacrificial of your other time. I would even venture to say that it's hard on parents in America when it comes to work, just any type of parent.
It's not supportive of a family structure, honestly, in a lot of ways, unless you're your specific boss or, your specific company that you work for is supportive of that. I think that generally speaking, it's not very helpful to a family.
Yeah, and I think when you think about your upcoming family dynamic, if you're, interested in this, that's why you ask those questions, because your workplace could make this job a lot harder.
Right.
If they're not flexible. And a lot of people ask me, like, how do you work full time? How do you do that? And we'll get into that in a minute, how we kind of juggle it all. But I would say first and foremost, if my employer was not on board with me, did not understand my mission for it, was kind of, working against me in that, it would be 10 times harder.
Oh, absolutely.
10 times harder. I honestly don't even know if I would have a job at this point if they were not flexible with me, to be honest.
Which I don't know if that's something, technically you can get fired over, or I don't know if you're needing to like leave all the time and things like that. I do wonder about that, because if this is something you're choosing to do, I don't know. I feel like a workplace would need to be supportive to some extent. I don't really know what that looks like, but yeah, I definitely think for us, we work in spaces where that's very much supported.
Yeah, and common.
Very flexible, yeah.
Absolutely. I do know there is like a Family Protections Rights Act, which you guys can look up some information about that does protect some of your time when it comes to this, but it's very specific. And then some of it does fall on your employer to have their own policies and stuff like that. In America, it's not like a regulated thing. It's not similar, like I said, where you can only have a part-time job or anything like that, and you're compensated to actually be a caretaker. I think that's a very interesting concept. I would love to see us move towards something like that, just because foster care does take a lot of your time.
Right.
And I think when we talk about stuff like this, it's an issue of juggling time and making sure that everybody's well taken care of, both at your job and at home.
And I think, too, this is a little bit outside of the work conversation, but if you don't have a good team of people from DHS helping you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's a very, like, I cannot imagine if we had some of the help that we have right now. And I know what you've talked about too, DHS giving rides and things like that. That would be so hard not to have that help.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, like leaving work to go get your kid from school if they're not riding the bus or, things like that. It's like you're always leaving work for something.
Yeah. There's definitely a constant juggle when it comes to having a new placement. We kind of talked about that a little bit in our getting a placement episode. But when you have a placement, there are different demands and different needs that will affect work. And so, how do you juggle that? I think we want to talk a lot about that today. What is it like to really work full time? Now, you may be protected in some aspects, but like a day to day, what's it like to be a full-time employee and a full-time mom? And that's a hard conversation.
Yeah.
Now, Camille's married, so, there are some people that are married who have a partner that chooses to stay at home.
Sure.
To take care of kids, whether that be foster kids or bio kids. That's still an option for some people. For you decided to work full-time.
Well, we kind of need to.
Yeah. It's a necessity.
Income-wise, it's like, it's... I guess I could not technically, but that would be really, really hard.
Yeah. So how did you come to the decision kind of to stay full-time? Because I know you've also experienced this job part-time. You went full-time, and then you decided to foster. How did you decide to stay full-time? What do you think are the benefits? Obviously, financially for you guys, it's kind of a need. But, like, how did you come to the decision, like, I can continue to do this?
Yeah.
And go forward with foster care?
I think the short answer is that, it's a necessity for our income for me to continue to work. I did go full time, last summer? And so I've been almost a year in full time again. And I've been full time before. I just took a little bit of a break and was part time. Thankfully, my husband allowed me to do that, and that was great. But yeah, mainly it was income. But whenever we were trying to have kids and going through fertility treatments, when we stepped out of that, we were like kind of taking a break and deciding to move into foster care is around the time that I went full time. So it was, at the time I wanted to be like a stay-at-home mom and do all of that. And that wasn't happening. And so I think that's kind of when we moved into like, I want to take on more responsibility. I need to think about something other than like trying to have a baby. And so that was work and really putting myself into my job, which again, I work with kids. So I think it was just a combination of wanting to have more responsibility in my job and just submerging myself more into what I care about, which is kids. And so it was a combination.
Similarly for me, being a single person, I also didn't really have an option but to work. I thought about some different options in terms of work. Like maybe I would rather work at home or have a better schedule. Like me and Camille both come from a place of having kind of a different schedule. It's not a typical 9-to-5 schedule.
Yeah.
And so that can make it even harder to parent. I think a lot of moms that are able to work like while their kids are at school, it's probably the most ideal. We do not live in the most ideal circumstances, but I do love my job, and I knew that my job would endlessly support me, and that the people at my job and my coworkers, that I work in a very family environment. And so I knew like, I think I just need to stay here and like let them support me through this and see how it goes. Our schedule is still like one of the main things that's really hard, especially since I don't have like another person to rely on. But honestly, can I caveat and just say, I don't understand school pickup times.
I don't either.
At all. This is my one qualm with the world is like, what parent other than a stay-at-home parent?
I honestly want to ask.
Yeah. Can you
like,
guys
what
let
do you
us know?
do? What do you honestly do? I think that was a big thing when becoming a parent was like,
the school pickup time.
How do people do this? I mean, obviously I know there's like buses, kids ride the bus back home. But like if your kids are young and they can't stay at home by themselves, I don't understand.
And as a foster parent, like if you're just now getting to know this kid, you're also not going to like really want them to like go home by themselves. They're probably not going to want to go home by themselves. Like, I don't understand. I just needed to say that because like I do not understand. Our biggest scheduling conflict is school pickup. Like, I don't know why that is so hard, but who is available at 3 p.m? Like I said, unless you work from home or unless you're a stay-at-home parent, that schedule is really tough. So anyway, there are a lot. I'll get back.
That's a great point.
I'll get back on my train. But there's a lot of things like that I had to consider as like literally look at one of my average days and one of their average days and line up the conflicts and kind of see like, is this job going to serve me into foster parenthood? Now, I've been at my job for a long time, like I said. I really love my job, and so it wasn't like a question of really whether I wanted to leave, but there were definitely moments in this whole thing and in our journey. I've had my kids for almost 3 years that I was like, I don't know if I can continue to do this and work this job specifically because of like the evenings and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was about to say, being an athletic trainer, you have games that you have to go to at night.
Yeah.
And so you're out sometimes till 10 o'clock, or if you have an away game or something like that.
Right.
That's something I like commend you for because I looked to Ramsey so much whenever we were looking into fostering. I was like, if she can do this and like organize all this, I think we can handle it.
Yeah, let me tell you, if I could do this, anyone could do that. I'm just kidding. I work in sports medicine. I've been doing that for a really long time. I really like it, but it's more like a coach's schedule, like games, but every season. I work every single sport all school year long for a high school. And so, sometimes it's really fun, but that was also a consideration. My job not only was fostering a consideration when I thought about my job, but my job was a consideration when I thought about fostering, because I was thinking like, what age would be appropriate to like come to games and enjoy that, to hang around athletics and have a good time. Like a baby is not going to be good for my schedule just in terms of what I do for work.
Right.
So I would say if you're also thinking about it, think in the inverse as well. Like, okay, how does my job like affect my fostering journey? How will I maybe make decisions foster care wise, not just job wise? Of what I'm willing to handle or able to do in terms of a schedule.
Yeah, for us, that looked like what kind of cultural background does our child come from because of the families that we work with. And so if you come from one culture, it might be a huge shock to step into our job because, our child is with us a lot at our job too. And so that was something we had to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we did too, and that was something that I brought up. I work in a city school in Little Rock, and so I'm definitely more in the minority when it comes to things culturally there. And so I wanted to make sure if my kids are going to be spending a lot of time at my job with me, are they comfortable with kind of the environment that I'm going to be in and stuff like that. And obviously that worked out for us. But yeah, that's a consideration as well if your kids are coming to work with you. Now, most of you probably aren't going to be having your kids coming to work with you. We have definitely different jobs in that respect, but maybe you do have a job like us and you say, hey, yeah, like maybe they could come along for a little bit, for this thing or that thing, then maybe just make those considerations as well. Is that an environment that they're going to feel supported in, safe in, represented in, and, how are they going to feel about being at work with you?
Right. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, there's some different preferences you can make in terms of like what type of child you want to foster to, whether that's age, race, gender, etc. And your job might play a role into that. It might not, but it might. And like if you're, willing to maybe take children with disabilities or different abilities or something, where they have more medical care or have more needs, that may affect your job as well. And so you might want to think about, how that all plays in together.
Right.
And I had a friend who's actually a nurse who came to some of her kids through care by working in the hospital.
Wow.
And seeing them as patients. So that's pretty wild. But, just thinking about things like that, like would your job support you? Is it a place where you can even like get medical? Like, are you in the medical field? If you're working a job where you have a certain set of skills, maybe there's a way you can help in foster care that you didn't even realize that there was a need there. So that seems kind of crazy, but maybe your occupation makes you think, hey, there's a certain set of, specific needs that I can help. That would be super awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just to that, obviously you don't want to put on paper that you want this or you want that. I think if you're coming from a place of what would be conducive to your child and helpful for that child, I think it's okay to be specific about those things.
Yeah.
If you, have that heart behind it.
Yeah, don't just like put preferences to put preferences.
Yeah, I think
that's kind of both of our ideologies on that. But yeah,
check yourself before you do that because
absolutely check your heart. No, but for real, definitely look at that. But also, consider the environments that you're in, what your schedule does look like, what your time looks like for the child, not just because like, oh, well, this would make my life easier, which is good in some respects, but like, how do we make decisions? Like I remember, speaking of, this isn't like a preferences thing, but I remember, I was having to make some decisions about school for my kids. And here in Arkansas, I mean, DHS, if they trust you, gives you a lot of decision-making power for your kids, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess. But for us, they gave me a lot of power on what I wanted to do with school, a lot of decision-making skills there. And so I looked really hard at different schools, and my kids were already in separate schools, and I was just kind of trying to get it all together. And I remember being like, they say the best thing is for them to stay in the school. And they were like, the best thing is that you're able to take care of them well. And it was my job, honestly, that was making it a little bit hard. Where we lived, where my job was compared to where they were going to school was like outside of where I was like working and all of this stuff. And so, there's some decisions I've had to make too for them that I'm like, man, I hate to like change schools or do anything like that. But then also went into that decision-making process saying, hey, if you're going to do this, make sure this is something that's going to work out for you in the long term, wherever you work, wherever they want to go to school. Like it's going to be able to kind of be a decision that is going to be a long-term decision. So I know I considered that a lot too when I was talking about my job. And so sometimes there's like decisions that have to be made, but does that make my life easier? Yes, but it makes it easier for me to take care of them.
Right.
Not just because I selfishly want to have a school that's way closer to my job, but like I need a school that's way closer to my job because I need to be able to pick them up and to transport them and to do certain things that I have to do. So I would say too, like, don't feel bad about having to make those decisions if it's what's best for the child. And I will say, our school is amazing. And I'm so glad I made the decision that I made. So it definitely wasn't like a huge sacrifice. In the end, it was great. It was exactly what we needed. But, there's things that you'll have to think thoughtfully about.
Yeah, I think for us, we had a little bit of the opposite experience where we ended up having to go to a school that was a little bit further out. But I think, again, it was like something we had to consider. Did we have help? Thankfully, DHS and the office that we're out of, they help with rides and things like that. And so that was, again, something we had to consider because the school that May was at first was a lot closer to work, and I could leave work and go get her really quick. But now that's not necessarily the case. But we had to consider it all.
Yeah, and it wasn't what was best for her. And so
exactly.
Now you're making a sacrifice in time and in work and having to get extra help and stuff like that. Yeah, so, it does play a role. And I think people are just always like, well, how do you do this all in work? And it's like, it is a serious juggle. It's a lot of decisions that have to be made. And you just have to take it one step at a time, make sure you're still doing everything that we talk about in all of our episodes, like doing it for the betterment of your children, making that number one. And then, just making sure if you let that guide you, then you'll make the right decision.
I think definitely what you had said initially about having conversations with your work is so important on the front end, because if you set an expectation of, this is what I'm going into and I need some flexibility, I think that will set the tone for how things work out in the future. So I think, again, for both of us, that was helpful going into this, is that we had that understanding with our work.
Absolutely. And so your job might be understanding, you may have this all kind of worked out in your head, but it's still a daily juggle. Camille, how do we do it all? How do we work full time? How do we run a podcast? How do we show up at church, show up on social media, show up for our families? Like, how is it possible? I think that's the main question that I get the most is like, okay, well, yeah, your work says they'll be flexible and this, you don't really know what you're getting into with foster care. So how do you do it? Like, maybe what are some tips or tricks? Like you said, you kind of use some resources to help you a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about those?
Yeah, which you told us about that. And not all DHS offices do this, but for us and our caseworker, we actually have available to us transportation through DHS, which is so helpful. Obviously, that's not something you want to just like rely heavily on, and we try not to. We are trying to start to lean more on family members that are around us. Thankfully, we do live near family where we're able to do that. Not everybody has that. But I think that's something we're trying to juggle right now is like, okay, we're just starting to bring some of our family into this and see if they can give May rides and things like that. But I'm so, so thankful for our caseworker and for the team that she works with, because they are able to pick her up from school and bring her where she needs to go. We do try and do as much as we can as far as, doctor's appointments and therapy. I think that is another thing to address, is that with a child in foster care, a lot of times there's like way more appointments.
Yeah.
So for therapy specifically, I know you use a resource where therapy comes to school. And so that's a big helpful thing. But yeah, there's just a lot more appointments and things that you have to juggle. And so I think bringing family into that is a huge blessing if you have that resource.
Yeah, and for me, I don't have that resource because I am 3 hours from my family and I am, again, single. So my community looks a little bit smaller, but obviously I have friends that are really helpful. But some things that we've done, like you mentioned, I switched their counseling service to a school-based counseling service. So they come to the school and do therapy with my kiddos. Another thing for us that has been huge, and we're here right now, so I'm going to shout them out, is our after-school program through the nonprofit that Zach and Camille work at. They actually have been helping us for a long time. I've been volunteering with them for a long time and things like that. We have a really good relationship, so I was able to put my kids in that free after-school program. They provide tutoring and meals and all of that, and so that actually ended up aligning with my work schedule on a normal, school practice day for me, watching sports. It aligns pretty well. And so I've been able to use that resource. I know for you as well, May's able to come over here after school to the after school program if she wants to and hang out a little bit. And so that gives us a little bit of leverage as well. But there's a lot of different things like that in our community that I wasn't aware of before. And so maybe in your community, I would look at, are there any free after school programs? Is there a Boys and Girls Club? Is there, something that somewhere that does transportation or provides meals or things that maybe would be harder
right?
if you didn't have that resource? I know, again, I think one thing I do want to say too is there can be a misconception that if I'm saying that, then it's oh, I take them to school all day and then they go to an after school program, then they eat there. What do you actually do for them? Do you parent them? Do you ever see them? I get questions like that online.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a valid concern. But yes, I parent my children. I see them all the time. I do school pickup. I drop them off at after school. I typically pick them up or Camille brings them to me. They'll come to games with me. They'll hang out with me. We spend a lot of time together as a family. I think that's when people, that's some people's major concern is well, if you work all the time, when do you ever see your kids? But you also have to remember I'm a single parent. So I see them anytime that they need anything. I'm seeing them. So we do spend a lot of time together, but it is sometimes a juggle. And there's weeks where I don't see them as much at home.
Right.
And then there's weeks when I do. And I think sometimes using those resources can be really good. But then also, as a mom, there are times when you just want to be I want to be the one to pick you up, to take you home. I'm off early today or this and that. And my schedule changes in the summer too. So they'll go to the summer program and then I'll pick them up. And usually we've been spending half the day at the pool, half the day out here because I'm off of work earlier. And so that time of year is really fun for us as a family because my job changes up, their schedule changes up. And we spend a lot more time together and it's so, so fun. But yeah, during the school year, there are times when it's we kiss each other, we go to bed, and that's what we did for the day. And then there's times where we spend a lot of time. Our weekends, we maximize a lot. And again, it's that American grind where the work schedule is long and hard sometimes. And that does leave for little family time. But we try to do the best we can to maximize spending time together.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that every family juggles. It's not just a family in foster care.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that that's every kid goes to school unless you homeschool or something like that. Every kid's going to go to school and every parent pretty much is working to some degree. That's what that looks like. And so I don't think that that's just exclusive to foster care.
No, absolutely not. Or single parenting. It's
right. Yeah.
That's true of a lot of families. Yeah. I think there's just a little bit of shame around being a working mom in some settings.
For
and
sure.
So I just want to encourage you, if this is something you want to do, don't feel shameful about that. You can be a good employee and a good mom.
Yeah.
And it's also okay to set boundaries at work and say, hey, being a mom comes first today. And sometimes you have to say, hey, being a mom comes first, but physically I need to prioritize being at work today.
Right.
And those are hard decisions to make, but I would just encourage you, don't let that stop you. I know we've been talking a lot about that in all these episodes, but don't let the fear of that stop you from wanting to love on kids, because if you have really good intentions of wanting to love kids, then you're going to be a good parent and you're going to prioritize them. So definitely consider your job, but don't count yourself out just because of your job.
And I think overall, just talking about how do you make it work, you just make it work. That's being a parent. And I have a way more respect now, jumping into this season of our life But I think you just make it work. You know?
Something just like kicks in.
Yeah.
That's like the mom thing where it's just like you literally make it happen. I remember that kicking in for me and me just being like, this is what being a mom is about. Like you make all of the things happen even when it seems impossible.
And I think you find that in yourself.
Yeah.
And being people of faith, like that's something we rely on God for. Like,
absolutely.
I think that you push yourself, and when you're at the end of your rope, you've got a little bit more to give.
Yeah.
And Zach kind of says it this way. He's like, it's just a different gear. You're operating on a different gear.
Absolutely.
And you don't realize you had it in you, but you did. And you make it work.
Yeah, and I prayed a lot for capacity. Like, God, if I'm supposed to do this, increase my capacity to be able to do all these things. And what's so funny is now on the other, I won't say I'm on the other side because my kids are like still super young. I'll be on the other side when they turn 18, but
you're not as new to it.
Yeah, now that I'm a little bit more seasoned, we'll say that. Yeah. There's so many things that we can do now and such a rhythm of our life that we have that we didn't have before. And it took a long time to get there, but there is capacity for it. And I feel a grace for it and like, space in our lives for it. And so, yeah, I would encourage you, even if you're struggling with that, if you're a new foster parent and you're like, this is not going to work, like I'm making it work, but this is not going to work long term, I would encourage you to maybe like stick it out, use those resources around you and keep going, because I did not think I was going to be able to make it work. Then I became a mom of 2 kids and I was like, I for sure am not going to be able to make this work. Yeah. I was like, I have no idea how the heck I'm going to do that. But you do, you find it. Like it's just the mom thing that you find in yourself, like you said, the mom gear. Maybe. Yeah,
and we're pretty new into this still too. We're now 4 months in, and we're just now kind of hitting some of those rhythms, and it might take longer for some people too. You know, there's a lot of factors going into it, but I definitely think that going into this journey, you have to give yourself grace. Absolutely. And prepare, just like and I talk about just like having a newborn baby, like give yourself grace those first few months, and it takes time. And then there's going to be stages you go in and out of. Yeah. Like you said, for you, it looks like different semesters and different seasons of the school year. Your schedule just totally changes. And so I think that that's just a rhythm of life, generally speaking. And that happens with your kids too, that you're going to go in and out of stages, and you're going to hit a flow, and then you're going to get out of that flow. And that's hard, but that's life.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if you're determined, you can do anything. And that's proven in being a working mom. And I would just say, if you're considering foster care, or you're already in foster care, you're looking to make a change at your job, or you're looking to make decisions, like I would just consider kind of the stuff that we've talked about today. And whether you decide to be a stay-at-home mom, a foster mom, or a working foster mom, or a work-from-home foster mom, whatever you decide to do, just know that we're in your corner and we support you. We support all the moms out there and whatever you decide to do. And it's definitely possible. You can do it. So be encouraged. Yeah, I think it all comes down to, if you're determined, you can do anything. And that is true no matter what type of job you have. If you're a working parent, if you're a stay-at-home parent, if you're a work-from-home parent, you know, this world is changing so much. There's so many different ways to work. Our situations are unique to us. You know, we have unique jobs and unique schedules, but that doesn't mean that everybody who has any type of work schedule can't foster and can't help in this space. And so if you're considering foster care, I would just say, have those hard conversations. Think really critically about the decisions that you're going to make in terms of your job, and always thinking of the kids first, because that is the whole point of us being foster parents and foster parenting. And so don't let your job count you out. Don't think that staying at home isn't important. We would just encourage you that no matter what it is, it's going to be a little bit of a juggle. It's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. But if you're determined, you can do anything, including work and foster parent. So we hope that encourages you. Well, hope that helps. Thank you for listening. As always, we're so glad that you are here. If you want to keep up with us through the week or see our silly videos, you can follow us on social media, on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, all at Hope That Helps Pod. We also have a new feature on Spotify called Listener Support. So if you want to throw us a little something as a donation over there, it will help us to keep the podcast going. If you're liking our content and you want to hear more of it, you can go check that out on Spotify.
Also, if you would leave us a 5-star review, that really helps to get the podcast out to more people. If you like this content, then we want to get it out to as many people as we possibly can. So please go leave us a 5-star review. Also, thank you to our production team, Eric Pardo and Zach Grimes. We love y'all. So thankful for y'all.
All right. Bye.